Besom, Ben and His Donkey by Edwin Waugh. Chapter 9. Where have you been all that day, me boy, Tammy? Neil. I dare say the reader has many a time seen one of those flies called blue bottles basooning about a room in summer, and drumming itself against the panes in vain attempts to fly through, no doubt a little puzzled to know what the hard transparency was that kept it in. I dare say he has seen this many a time, and I shouldn't wonder if he has opened the window sometimes and let the bewildered captive free. He might as well. But if he has not, he may have seen the poor wretch, after beating a weary tattoo upon the glass for a while, turn away in despair from that mysterious barrier, and go buzzing about the room again in search of an outlet to the open air. And if he happened to be in an old workshop or some such place where people are not nice about a cobweb or two, he may have seen the wandering insect at last get entangled in the slime meshes of a spider's net, and then begin to struggle in a frenzy of terror, to shake itself out of the snare, before the long-legged villain in the flossy cave at the corner rushed forth to drink his blood. I have no doubt the reader has seen all this many a time, and it is 1,000 to 1 in such a dire extremity he has set the terrified flutterer free before his enemy fell upon him, and then has been glad to see him fly away, delighted to find himself delivered from the jaws of an untimely death by an unknown friend, and roving at will once more in the open air. So did old Roddles set the poor besom maker free that night, and so fled Ben towards his breezy little nest in the hills. As Roddles stood at the end of the lane watching Ben canter down the brow, he laughed to see him speed away into the distance so briskly, with Enoch's butcher meat in his panniers. For though he was as fond of a joke as his neighbours, yet he had some tender corners in his nature, and he had somehow taken a liking to Ben. Besides, it did the old man's heart good to think how nicely he had turned the tables upon the 3 rogues in the back room of the alehouse, who were eating Ben's beef and rejoicing in the expectation of the poor fellow coming to beg and pray for them to let him have his jackass again. And Roddle was not afraid of them finding out how he had tricked them, for he knew that they were not ill-conditioned lads at bottom, and he knew also that they were sure to enjoy the thing, even though it had been turned against them. But he thought it best to wait a few minutes, so as to let Ben get well out of reach. So he went into the alehouse again and sat down in the tap-room by himself, listening to the merriment of the noisy 3, who were at their stolen supper in the back room. As Ben cantered down the brow, he looped back 2 or 3 times, half suspecting that he should be pursued, but he lost no time till he had got a good way from the village. The way was lonely, but it was a glorious night, and the scenery was fine. The road led by Ely Hall, an ancient seat of the Chadwick family. It stands on the brink of a picturesque clough called the Thrush, the scene of many a superstitious story. The moon shining through the trees at Ely Hall streaked the road with silver bars, but Ben did not slacken his pace till he came out from the shade of the woods into the open moonlight. There he began to take his time, for he was in sight of his native moors, and he felt safe. Seeing that there was nobody on the road, he looked out for a quiet place where he could examine the contents of the panniers again before he got home. "Whoa!" said he, jumping down from the back of the donkey and leading it by the bridle into a snug nook, where there was a pile of stones broken for the mending of the road. "Whoa!" said Ben, "let's loot these things o'er again afore we get in home," and he began to rummage in the pannier that Dimple had crushed against the wall in his perilous ascent to the mill chamber. "Clogs," said Ben, taking the clogs out of the pannier and looking at them all around, before he laid them down upon the stone heap. "The clogs are right to begin with. Now then, let's see. The soap," continued he, taking the clogs up again and groping inside of them. It's there, that's safe too. Now then," continued he, dipping his hand into the pannier again and feeling the butcher meat. "Beef the next," and he pulled it out and stared with all the eyes in his head. "Hullo!" cried he, turning it over. "This is no beef. It's a pluck and liver, by mass. How's that shaped? Let's see. Nay, I'll swear it were beef when I left Ratstead town. It runs in me head so, as how 'tis. Well now, that caps me trash," continued he, laying the pluck and liver down upon the stone heap beside the clogs and staring at it. "It's no use," said he, scratching his head. "I canna make it out. Well, come, let's look at t'other stuff." And he dipped his hand into the pannier again, but feeling something hard and hairy, like a cold terrier dog, he plucked his hand back and opened the pannier. "Hullo!" cried he, staring inside. "What the devil's the next?" The moonlight fell full into the pannier. "By Guy," said Ben, "it favors her. Aye, it is. It's a sheep's shed, begod," cried he, lifting it out. "Now, how's that getting there, I want to know," continued he, holding it out at arm's length in the moonlight. "That's noan of my sheep's shed. If it is, I'll go to say." And he sat down upon the stone heap and stared and scratched his head again for a minute or two. "It's no use," said he, rising to his feet again. "I canna make it out. What'll turn up next, I wonder? Let's look for beef now." And he rooted in the pannier again. "It's noan there," said he, getting roused. "Let's try this t'other pannier. No, it's noan there neither. There's plenty of broken pots, but no beef. The candles are here, I see, but they're mashed to ribbons. I munna let our Betty see those, not to neat, as how 'tis. Howd, I put candles into me pocket. If our Betty finds me out, her'll ring such a peal of treble bomb majors in yon coat as never were yeared be mortal mon. Stop, I mun clear these broken pots out afore we go any fur." And he picked the pieces of pot out of the pannier and flung them one after another into the ditch by the wayside. "Now then," continued he, "let's straighten this thing a bit, and then nobody can tell." And he pulled the crushed pannier into shape again as well as he could, and then sat down upon the stones again and began to rummage in his pockets. "Now then," said he, "let's see if these t'other things are right. Snuff, aye, and bacca, and powder blue, and milk and water-colour yarn, aye, and toffee for childer, all right. And me brass is all right too," said he, counting it over. "Come, it's better nor likely, when all's said and done. I think I'd our face up," continued he, jumping on behind again. "Come, Dimple, our lad, we may as well go soon as that, and try to pull through as well as we come. Come up." "But by mass," said he, as they paddled away, "that pluck and liver gets o'er me. And a sheep's shed too. I can map neither top nor tail of this. And then, where's beef? I'll swear I bought some brisket off our Boswell. 4pence halfpenny a pound it were. And where is it gone to? That's what I want to know. Come up, Dimple. We's be home in 2-3 minutes now." Ben turned off at the right-hand side of the highway and went up an old wandering pack-horse track that led by his lonely cottage. This cottage stood in a nook of the hills about 1.5 miles up the moorside. When he got within 100 yards or so of home, he saw his wife standing with her hands folded in her apron upon a green knoll which commanded a view of the pathway far down the hillside. "Now for it," said Ben. "Thou lassie's yon. Come up, Dimple," and assuming a careless air, he began to whistle. As soon as Betty saw him, she came down the footpath to meet him. "Hallo," said Ben. "Is that thee, me lass?" "Why, who should it be, thinkster?" replied Betty. "Neat Brink's crows, whom. What a time there's been! Wherever hast ta stopped at till now? And no one's naught but their cell and childer. And such a lonely place as this is. I wonder how tha can think. Whatever hast ta been shammocking and doing till this time at neet? If tha gets thy back turned, tha doesn't care a smite for neither meat nor childer. Not a heap, tha doesn't, wherever hast ta been." "I couldn't come no sooner," replied Ben in a timid tone. "Tha could ha' come sooner if tha'd wanted," answered Betty, "but tha didn't want. Did ta call at top at Blackwater?" "Why, theer." "At Thark up to Glory?" "No, I didn't." "Then tha's been at Thorpe Moon?" "No, I haven't." "Well, tha's been somewhere where there's no business to be till now. There's no decent folk that needs to stop out of their own house till such times as this. Never tell me. I wonder how tha can think and knows how ill I've been. Hast ta brought those things?" "Aye, sure I have," replied Ben, pottering about the jackass. "The things are all right. Thou'rt always agate and making a bother about naught. In without, I'll bring 'em directly." "Go thy ways in thy cell," said Betty. "I'll look after 'em. Thy supper's a top thoven." "What is it?" inquired Ben, scratching his head. "I've warmed thou some of that lobscouse that were left yesterday," replied Betty. "Is there naught else?" "Naught else," answered Betty. "What would after? Dost ta think I can make stuff? I guess tha's been wearing thy brass on bits o' dainty nivels in town. Makes thou so tickle about stomach to eat. It is there, and if thou can eat it, thou can leave it. I can eat it, but it's good enough for me, I guess." Ben saw that it was no use contending with her, so he went in and sat down to his supper, leaving her to look after the things in the panniers. But his ears were alive with anxiety to hear how she went on when she came to look up his cargo, and as he went on eating slowly, he was very wretched, for he felt as if every word that she had said to him was true. In a minute or two, Betty looked in at the doorway and said, "Thou'st gone and forgotten those pots now?" Aye," replied Ben, looking up from his supper. "So I have." Said Betty. "Thou has a yed, and so has a pin. Where's candles?" "They're here," replied Ben. "They're here in me pocket." And as soon as she turned herself away, he slipped the broken candles upon a shelf in the corner. "The candles are all right. I put 'em up on shelf." "And where are t'other things?" "What t'other things?" "The yarn and stuff." "I have 'em all right," answered Ben. "The backer and all." "I dare say. Catch thee forgetting backer," replied Betty. "Well, but I brought some snuff for thy grandmother, haven't I?" said Ben, "and a bit of toffee for children. Are they gone to bed?" "Are they gone to bed?" said Betty. "Where dost ta think they'd be at this time o' neet?" And then she felt in the panniers again. "Hullo," said she, lifting out the pluck and liver. "I telled thou to bring a bit of beef." "Well," replied Ben, "I did not think on it, but that'll do as well, won't it?" "What hast ta gone for it?" inquired Betty, turning it over. "There's a sheep shed and all, I see. How much were they?" "I can hardly tell till I reckon up, but tha's know all about it on morning. They're cheap enough, that's all I can tell." "Well, it looks naught amiss," said Betty. "But what's this?" continued she, taking out some pieces of pot which Ben had missed in the bottom of the pannier. "Broken pots." And bringing them in her hand, she came up to the table where Ben sat at supper, and staring at him, as she held them out before his eyes, she said, "Ben, whatever in name of fortune hast ta been doing?" Ben's face suddenly flushed with shame, and flinging down his knife and fork, he replied, "I'll tell thou what I've been doing, lass. I've been telling thou a lot of sunbrunt lies, and I'll not have it upon me mind a minute longer. So sit thou down in that chair, and there's year all about it, both there and Thergate, and then the may do as there's a mind. Lord and me, said Betty, taking a chair by the fireside. I wonder whatever thou'll come to in end of all. Pushing the table and the supper aside and blushing at the thought of his ridiculous situation, Ben set to and told his astonished dame the whole story of the jackass adventure from beginning to end. He told it freely too, not screening himself from his own foolish share of the thing, for the floodgates of his frank and truthful nature were thrown open, and he was determined to make a clean breast of it at once, let the consequences be what it might. Now then, said he, when he'd finished, there's it as I have it, and if thou can mock any better on it than it is, well and good. Well, if ever, said Betty, and then they both sat silent for a minute or so, and then she broke out. Ben, said she, I never thought there'd been such a foo as this comes to. There's less wit than Batterlash that beat their waiter for running, and as for that sheepshed, they may take it back where it come from, I'll have no one on it. No nobody else in this house shall taste on it, not pluck and liver neither, so they may take 'em back. Well, replied Ben very quietly, I want no on it. What dost to bring other folks' stuff here for then? Said Betty. I didn't know that I had it, I tell her, replied Ben. I didn't know that thou had it, continued Betty sneeringly. I think thou hardly knows that thy yed's on 1/2 at time. Thou like a bit of a child that canna go out at th' house without letting t'other childer pite the pins out of its clothes. If thou gets thy toes turned away from home, ony mak of wastrels can mak a fool on thou. They'll have folks shouting thou in lane, and saying, See ya, that's him that sent his jackass up into Footmill chamber. I wonder whatever thou thinks on. Hast thou done thy supper? Aye, replied Ben very patiently. I've had as much as I will have to-night. Why, canna thou finish that bit? No, I'll have no more, said Ben in a plaintive tone. Thou'rt no taking a sulk at thy supper because I've spoken a word or two, sure. Thou cares not whether I am or not, replied Ben. Go thy ways to bed then, do, said Betty, for thou needs as much care tacking on as one of yon bits of childer that's asleep. Ben bent down and began to untie his shoes without a word, and in the stillness that lasted a minute or two, a faint pid-padding sound was heard upon the floors above, as if somebody was playing upon the boards with 2 bits of fat. Betty knew what it was in a second, and she said, I declare, that's wackant childer. And she wiped her hands on her apron and went to the foot of the stairs. It's our Billy, continued she. That little rebel, I'll warn thee. But the little fat-legged Cupid came paddling down with sleepy face, muttering now and then, I want my dad. And then Ben went in his stocking feet to the bottom of the stairs to meet his flaxen-haired darling, and the little thing sprang round his neck, and he hugged him close. Hiding his face in the child's breast, Ben said, my lad, and then he burst into tears. Ben, said Betty, thou art as soft as my pocket. I wonder whatever I mun do with you. Tack him upstairs with thou. When Ben had got 3 or 4 stairs up the stairs, he stopped and said, Mun I tag him into our bed? Aye, replied Betty, wiping her eyes with her apron. Thou may if thou likes. I'll be up directly. Thou'll not be long, said Ben. No, I'll no but put the clean things to fire, and then. In another hour all was still in the lonely cottage, and the kind moon smiled upon the poor besom maker's sleeping household. The cat was curled up asleep upon Ben's jacket, which lay upon the rocking chair by the hearth, and the fire was dying out in the lowermost bars of the grate. Dimple was at rest in his wooden shed at the house end, after all the troubles of the day, and the clear water falling from a spring in the moorland side into the old stone well trough in front of the cottage played a sweet little tinkling tune to the listening night. The cottage itself seemed sleepy in the moonlight, and peace breathed all around this little mountain nest. Sleep on, poor Ben, with thy kind dame by thy side, and thy little brood of moorland fairies about thee. Sleep on in thy lonely cot, and rest thee for the coming day. The tiny wild flower fears not the storm that roars amongst the forest trees. Sleep on, and wait refreshed, to travel forward in thy simple way, till evening brings thee home. And when thy little day of life is over, may thou fall asleep with a smile, like a tired child in its mother's arms, and be gathered to thy fathers in the old chapel yard down the hill. And thy last long rest shall be as sweet as if thy pilgrimage on earth had been amongst the courts of kings. This audiobook, narrated by Malc Cowle on behalf of the Northen Grove Publishing Project, was produced in support of the Working Class Movement Library, 51 The Crescent, Salford, M5 4WX. Other Besom stories by Edwin Waugh will follow shortly.